both ways. Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. Excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare, we're trying to provide housing for Black Americans. The impact on the choice, the idea that they're going to, I'm proposing that everybody, the millionaires pay 1%. So no one after, I would not raise the cost of Social Security for anybody. I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. And wants to get away with, get rid of the ability of Medicare for us to be able to negotiate drug prices with the big pharma companies. What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. No one was hurt. No one Israeli was accidentally killed, and it just stopped. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more border patrol and more asylum officers.
You cannot be serious running this guy again for president for another 4 years. A guy who cannot control his bowels in the presence of His Holiness the Pope. A guy who cannot find his way off a platform. A guy who trips over imaginary matchsticks on television, live in front of august and significant audiences. A guy who can't speak without an earpiece, literally telling him what words to say, and he still cannot say them. A guy not fit to be sent out for a loaf. As my good friend Lionel says, would you ask Joe Biden to pick you up from the airport? As I say to parents and grandparents, would you let Joe Biden look after your children or your grandchildren? A guy who has his finger on the nuclear trigger.
More revelations about the empire of lies. It turns out that as part of their diabolical propaganda campaign, Biden's government paid screenwriters and comedians to mock the unvaccinated. These people are from hell. They are slaves of Satan under their false smiles, their false halos, and all the rest of it. They're thoroughly demonic.
The idea that we're going to send in offensive equipment and have planes and tanks and trains going in with American pilots and American crews, just understand, and don't kid yourself, no matter what you all say, that's called World War III.
The United States, together with our allies and partners, is going to begin training Ukrainian pilots in fourth-generation fighter aircraft, including F-16s, to strengthen Ukraine's Air Force as part of a long-term commitment to Ukraine's ability to defend itself.
Bunker sleazy Joe Biden has gone haywire on television. We've seen the videos of him wandering around lost. We even saw when he came to England for an important summit meeting, him attempting, apparently, to walk off a pier into the sea, saved only by his good wife, who turned him round and marched him back in a landward direction. We've seen him utterly unable to read out the words on his auto cues. We've seen him misspeak and misstate names, dates, and places, and even confuse his sister for his wife. But this week saw perhaps the worst of all Joe Bidens. Take a quick look at this.
The impact, what happened on July the 6th, had international repercussions beyond what I think any of you can fully understand. The impact, what happened on July the 6th, had international repercussions beyond what I think any of you can fully understand.
Well, I don't know if that's a Botox nightmare or whether it's a plastic surgery meltdown. or whether it's some kind of stroke, but Joe Biden is in no fit state to run America, even less to run the world, even less to run a world at war. Joe Biden thinks that events in Washington happened not on January the 6th, but on July the 6th. And he thinks that it had international repercussions that none of us can understand, when in fact, in comparison to a weekday sojourn down the Champs-Élysées in France with a yellow vest on, it was a minor skirmish of people in buffalo hats and Red Indian regalia trying to get through unlocked doors with the complicity of the security state, as is now becoming clear. Joe, it was January the 6th, not July the 6th. And it had no international ramifications at all. And whatever happened to your face? I'm not being unkind. I have said many times that this is elder abuse. His family, his party, his government is actually engaging in cruelty towards an elderly man no longer in control of his faculties or his bowels, as His Holiness the Pope found in the Vatican towards the end of last year. This is a man who sleeps with the nuclear football. He sleeps with a bag that contains the nuclear codes that could send thermonuclear intercontinental ballistic missiles into orbit, into action. He is the man that can bring humanity on this planet to a complete halt, a complete destruction of every living being and thing on this planet. Let's just hope he doesn't confuse the nuclear codes for his alarm clock. Let's just hope that stumbling in a hurry to get to his hourly visit to the lavatory, he doesn't trip over that nuclear football. This is a clear and present danger to the safety and peace of the world, never mind to the good governance of the United States of America. But even when he's not on screen, the things he's saying are increasingly unhinged. This week, he accused Iran of fueling the war in Ukraine because it is selling to Russia the drone technology that is being used in the war. But Joe Biden has sent $112 billion to fuel the war in Ukraine. Not only that, he sent Boris Johnson as his secret weapon to stop Zelensky from bringing the war to a close nearly 8 months ago. Joe Biden is the man who is fueling the war in Ukraine. It's Biden and America and NATO, not Iran, that are fueling the war. How come NATO is allowed to send hundreds of billions of dollars and euros of weapons into the war in Ukraine, but Iran cannot sell drones to one of the belligerents in that war in Ukraine? What's the thinking behind that? What's the logic when you decide to make a statement like that? Have you no self-awareness at all? Are you allowed to send any weapons to anybody, but other people are not allowed to send weapons to anybody? Russia and Iran are partners. They have mutual defense responsibilities. They have treaty obligations. They are close relations. Why would one not be allowed to give weapons to the other when you are allowed to give all the weapons that the military-industrial complex can produce? What's the thinking behind a statement like that? I'll tell you what the thinking is. Have you noticed, as I just have. That they have stopped talking about RTP. It's a while since you've heard it, so I'll refresh your memory. RTP was the doctrine devised by Tony Blair and Bill Clinton. What a couple, what a gruesome twosome. That they used, the doctrine that they used to attack Yugoslavia. They couldn't get an attack on Yugoslavia through the United Nations Security Council, so they invented a new set of rules, which they later called the rules-based international order. You don't hear anything about that now either. The RTP stood for Right to Protect, by which any country had the right to arrogate to itself the right to protect any other people under attack or under threat of attack. That's the basis on which Britain and the United States and NATO got involved in the war in Yugoslavia, to protect people that they themselves defined as being in need of protection. Why don't they use that doctrine anymore? Because, of course, Russia would have the right to protect its co-religionists, its compatriots, its Russian-speaking people in the east of Ukraine, indisputably, according to the Council of Europe, according to all of the international observers, under ceaseless attack from the regime in Kiev since 2014. 14,000 people were killed. Would Russia not have a right to protect them under the Clinton-Blair doctrine of RTP? Of course they would. And therefore, they stopped talking about it. The rules-based international order, ditto, because the rules-based international order includes the right to protect. In other words, to step outside of international law, outside of the UN Security Council, and take unilateral or bilateral or multilateral action wherever you decide that the rules you have devised are being broken. Now, of course, it's all going disastrously wrong. I've just seen the front page of The Economist. I can't bear to open it. But the front page of The Economist still maintains, on this day of all days, that Ukraine can win the war against Russia. On the day that a Russian private military company, the Wagner Group, defeated NATO in the city of Solidar and is now, right now, mopping up in the catacombs of that city, that ancient city of salt, has now fallen not to the Russian armed forces, they're not even fighting there, but to a Russian mercenary group of private military contractors. That's how badly the war is going for Ukraine and for NATO. And of course, with the fall of Solidar, ineluctably comes the fall of Bakhmut, another ancient city riddled with catacombs, underground tunnels, in which a fight to the death is this evening occurring. So much so that the head of the Ukrainian military has pleaded with President Zelensky to withdraw, if they can, from the kettle in which they are trapped in Bakhmut, for fear of losing thousands of their soldiers on top of the 100,000 according to von der Leyen, or more according to credible military sources, that they have already lost. And Zelensky has refused his own army chief's demand that the soldiers be withdrawn from the noose in which they currently are poised. And as somebody, I think Colonel McGregor, just pointed out on social media a few minutes ago, Zelensky will be lucky, long before the Russians come, if the armed forces of Ukraine don't deal with him, if his own generals don't deal with him, because while he is cavorting on the stage of the Golden Globes, they are dying in the most unimaginable horror. Don't look at the videos I've looked at. I beg you, don't look at these young Ukrainian men giving their lives for a coke-sniffing, cross-dressing, porn actor, billionaire, cavorting with his film star friends in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, at the Golden Globes.
It's quite clear to me that the Israelis are committing genocide in Gaza. And in fact, the International Court of Justice just ruled that there is substantial evidence to think or to conclude that Israel is engaged in a genocidal campaign against the Palestinians. Well, the Biden administration is complicitous in this genocidal campaign. This is not in America's national interest to be involved in a genocidal campaign. And furthermore, as I said earlier, it's not in our strategic interest. So the question is, why can't Biden use the immense leverage that he has at his fingertips as the president of the United States to coerce the Israelis to stop this murderous campaign? And the answer is the Israel lobby. The Israel lobby is one of the most powerful interest groups in the United States, and it wields tremendous influence on what U.S. Middle East policy looks like. And Joe Biden is in a situation where there's no way that he can get Israel to change its behavior without paying a huge political price. And for someone who is up for re-election in November of this year, the last thing that he wants to do is take on the Israel lobby. Because if he, went after Israel and got tough with Israel and used all that American coercive leverage on Israel, the lobby would go after him hammer and tong, and they'd go to great lengths to make sure that he got defeated in the fall. So Biden, even though he thinks that what Israel is doing is not in America's strategic or moral interest, is incapable of doing anything to stop it. And it is, again, largely because of the lobby.
As Will Hutton, in surely the parody of all parodies in today's Guardian and Observer, claims that Joe Biden's nifty footwork has tied his opponents in knots, that Joe Biden is a political wizard. I'm not making this up. It's in the Observer today, that Joe Biden is the acme of liberal Western political leadership. And in fact, that much, at least, is true. And therein lies the problem. Now, as John McEnroe once said, you cannot be serious running this guy again for president for another 4 years. A guy who cannot control his bowels in the presence of His Holiness the Pope. A guy who cannot find his way off a platform. A guy who trips over imaginary matchsticks on television, live in front of august and significant audiences. A guy who can't speak without an earpiece, literally telling him what words to say, and he still cannot say them. A guy not fit to be sent out for a loaf. As my good friend Lionel says, would you ask Joe Biden to pick you up from the airport? As I say to parents and grandparents, would you let Joe Biden look after your children or your grandchildren? A guy who has his finger on the nuclear trigger. A guy whose leadership is being accepted by the prime ministers and presidents of all the countries of the Western world, even though his orders are taking us off a cliff at the bottom of which lies absolute destruction. Taking leadership from John Kennedy or even Bill Clinton is one thing. Are you really prepared to say that Joe Biden is your leader? Are you really with Will Hutton? That Joe Biden's nifty footwork has outfoxed all of his rivals? That Joe Biden is the best thing since sliced bread, even though I say he's not fit to send out to buy the bread? That's the new dividing line in politics, you see. It's not left and right. It's, are you prepared to follow the old man wherever he wants to go? Are you seriously going to run him again in November? And there are more than 80 million people going to vote for him again in November of next year. That is, of course, assuming that more than 80 million people did actually vote for him in the first place. I see that YouTube is now allowing people to question whether or not there was electoral fraud in the 2020 presidential election. Thanks, Mr. YouTube. Let me say that I don't believe for one single moment that this clown, this senile dotard, won the last presidential election. I believe that it was rigged. I believe the election was interfered with by the deep state of the United States, by the CIA, by the FBI, working in conjunction with the Clinton, Obama, Biden gang. That's what I believe. And now on YouTube, at least, I'm allowed, finally, to say it. Some of you think I'm cruel by highlighting continually the specter of the President of the United States, who is issuing all these diktats to all these European satrapies, wandering the corridors of the White House in his soiled pajamas, unsure which door is the toilet and which door is the Oval Office. Some of you think I'm being cruel. But if you saw the latest video of Joe Biden at the United Nations, wandering the wrong way off the stage and all but plummeting off the platform into the crowd of waiting photographers and journalists, must know that this man is not fit to be sent out for a loaf. You would not expect him to come back with the bread or the change or come back at all. Joe Biden is the most powerful man on the earth, and look at him. Look at him in video after video after video. There he is, almost plummeting off the edge of the platform. Well, we're almost falling off the edge of the cliff to which he has pushed us. Now, I'm running a poll on Twitter and on YouTube and on Telegram. Should President Joe Biden be retired on health grounds? And more than 10,000 people have voted on this poll already. You can vote right up until near enough the end of the show. And it doesn't make happy reading for the people of America. 85% on Twitter think he should be retired on health grounds. 90% on YouTube, and 93% on Telegram, where they are always the most perspicacious. One man who had great fun with Joe Biden this week. Please welcome Jimmy Dore. Jimmy, let's take a look at the latest tragicomedy. It's only 20 seconds. Bear with me. Let's look at Joe Biden's latest outing.
Mr. President, thank you. At the end of such a momentous event, the word thank you seems kind of inadequate. But for all the millions whose lives will be saved, for the communities where life will be transformed, thank you. So thank you, President Biden.
Jimmy, over to you.
Well, do you notice how he walks with his hands out like that? Like he has his hands kind of like in front of him. And I'm told that that's how people who are demented walk. So we know that Joe Biden is demented. This isn't something that happened once. This isn't something that happens twice. This isn't something that happened 3, 4, or 5 times. This is something that happens every time he finishes a speech. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know where to go. And he's walking with his hands out like that. And that's, he's like a child. If Joe Biden was a regular American, you'd take his keys to his car away. Because he wouldn't know how to, they would have to do a silver alert. They have these things in America called silver alerts where your cell phone has an alarm on it. And it means that an elderly person has gotten lost and wandered away from their home. And that's what Joe Biden would be getting if he didn't have handlers. But why? This goes to show how bad are his handlers. They know this happens to him all the time, and they still don't have a plan for it. They don't have a regular that an assistant or an aide would come up and walk him off stage and show him where to go. They don't do it. This is elder abuse. And, I do a joke in my act about Joe Biden was supposed to be here tonight, except he got stuck in a couch. He really does get stuck in couches. That's what that is the equivalent of. And I don't understand why his staff hasn't come with up with a plan and how to get him off of a stage. That's the basics he can't do. He can't get off of a stage. Anyway.
Why put him on a stage? Now, look, Jimmy, in my religion, it's a sin to mock the afflicted. But this man is afflicting the rest of the world.
Yes.
It would be a sin not to highlight his inadequacy.
So I'm not making fun of Joe Biden's dementia. I'm making fun of the lie they're telling us about Joe Biden's mental state. That's why you can make fun of Joe Biden. That's why you can make fun of this situation. We're not laughing at a demented person. We're laughing at the most powerful organization in the world lying to us right on camera. That's what this is. This is a lie. This is a lie equivalent to WMDs. This is the equivalent to the lie that led us into Libya. This is equivalent to the lie that led us into Syria. This is equivalent to the lie that has us committing a genocide in Yemen. This is equivalent to the lie that has us in bed with terrorists in Ethiopia. This is bigger than any lie Trump ever told. The lie that Joe Biden is not demented is a serious lie with serious consequences. And when I tweeted out that video on my Twitter feed, and I asked people, who do you think is actually running the country? Because it's not this guy. He can't even get himself off a stage. I wouldn't ask that guy directions to the freeway. Are you kidding me? This guy's running the world. So who is making the decisions? It's certainly not Kamala Harris. Who's making the decisions on Ukraine? Who is making the decisions that have ramped up our inflation here to a 40-year high? And he goes on television nightly. Whenever he gives an interview, they have to immediately walk back everything he said. He did a 60 Minutes interview this week, and he said, "Yeah, we would go to war to defend Taiwan," and then they had to immediately walk it back. Everything this guy says, they have to immediately walk back. The pandemic is over, but we have to walk that back. Everything he says. He is technically and legally the president, but we all know that he's not running the country. So I want to know who really is. I wish someone would ask his press secretary, who is a great liar. She's better than Trump's liars. And I wish that they would ask her who's really running the country.
Well, there's this bag, isn't there? They call it the football, which literally has the nuclear triggers in it. It cannot possibly be at the bottom of his bed, Jimmy. Because anything could happen. He could fall over it. He could confuse it with the remote control for the television.
The fact that the idea that Joe Biden has, so that was what we were supposed to be afraid of under Trump, George. Remember that? We were supposed to be afraid that Donald Trump, this madman, has his finger on the nuclear button. And now here we are, a guy who's visibly demented. They're lying about it, and he has his finger on the nuclear button as he's saber rattling with two nuclear powers, Russia and China. And I don't know why people in America or people in Europe are letting this happen. I don't understand what they get. I mean, I get that this is all about economics and the United States selling more liquefied natural gas to Europe. So if there's going to be a war, it's going to be about natural resources. So that's what this is at. But I don't really get what's in it for Germany, for the citizens. I get what's in it for the oligarchs, but I don't get it what's in it for the citizens. And I don't understand why they're putting up with it. Like, what's going to happen in Germany this winter with their energy costs? These are dire circumstances right now. And so I don't understand why so they say that now that Trump is gone, Joe Biden is the adult in the room. It's more like the adult diaper in the room is Joe Biden. He's not the adult in the room. He's the guy you need to take care of in the room. He's not the guy to lead the free world.
Now, we used to hear, speaking of Trump, all the time, the demand that the cabinet triggers Article 25 of the US Constitution and find that Donald Trump is not fit to carry out his duties, a kind of palace coup using the 25th Amendment. Now, if that was the talk of the town, the talk of the liberal town at least, the talk of New York town, city, why isn't it now? Why doesn't anyone raise now that, look, we'd be doing Joe Biden a favor? We'd be being compassionate to trigger Article 25 now.
So the reason why they were talking about doing that to Donald Trump and they're not talking about doing that to Joe Biden is because Joe Biden does the bidding of the establishment lock, stock, and barrel. So they don't care who the president is, how demented he is, how anything he is, as long as he's doing what they say. And he's doing exactly what they say. And he's saber rattling with two nuclear powers, and he's doing all the war stuff that they want him to do. And so they don't want to get rid of Joe Biden. He's the perfect guy to them to have in that office. And the reason why they don't want Trump in that office is because he puts a bad face on the establishment and imperialism. And so, the reason why they hate Donald Trump isn't because he's a liar. It's because every once in a while he accidentally tells the truth that you're not supposed to tell. Like, for instance, when they said, hey, why are you staying in Syria? He says, we're staying for the oil. No, you can't say that. No, we're staying for the oil. You have to say it's about democracy. You have to say it's about liberty. We're helping the people. No, we're staying for the oil. That's why we're staying. So that's why they can't have him. Because, and as much as Trump wants credit for spearheading Warp Speed, which gave us the mRNA vaccine for COVID in America, they won't give him credit. They still paint Donald Trump as an anti-vaxxer. And why won't they give him credit for the vax that he wants? Because he's a bad face. He's bad for the brand. They can sell more vaccines with demented Joe than they can with lying Donald Trump. And that's all this is. The president is not the president. The president is only the president as long as he does the bidding of the oligarchy and the establishment. And that is not hyperbole. Barack Obama, who everybody thought was a lefty socialist, got more money from Wall Street than his Republican opponent. His entire cabinet came from Wall Street. WikiLeaks revealed that, which is why they want to kill him, because he tells the truth about people like Joe Biden and Barack Obama. So that's exactly what's going on. That's why Joe Biden is allowed to be president, even though he can't even get himself off of a stage. That's what's really going on. And people don't know that, and people don't want to know that.
Is there another issue, Jimmy? I used to work for the satirical magazine Private Eye in London, and when Richard Nixon had Spyro Agnew as his vice president, they had a picture of the two of them on their front page. And in the speech bubble, Nixon's pointing at Agnew and he says, no one's going to shoot me with this guy next in line. Is there something in the Kamala Harris issue that they can't get rid of Joe Biden because that makes Kamala Harris the president?
Hey, you know what? That's a great point. Yes, exactly right. People don't. What a better insurance policy for Joe Biden to remain president than to pick Kamala Harris as his vice president. Boy, oh boy, she sounds like Joe Biden, and she's of sound mind. That's what's bad. That's what's bad about Kamala Harris. I don't get what people see in Kamala Harris. Every time she talks, she embarrasses herself. And, you know, she's supposed to be in charge of the border crisis in the United States. And they keep asking her, hey, have you been to the border yet? She hasn't even been to the border yet. So they're clowns, right? So what people don't know about Kamala Harris is that she was actually the first choice of the oligarchy to be president. She was the first one who went to Martha's Vineyard and they canonized her. They anointed her. She's going to be, they gave her all the money and they thought that they had they had a female Barack Obama. They thought they had an attractive African-American who spoke eloquently and could get people to go to sleep while the oligarchy and the establishment crushed them economically, which is what Barack Obama did. Barack Obama was a sweet talker and he made people feel good when he spoke while he was screwing them. Barack Obama admitted that he is not a socialist, but that his policies should be considered moderate Republican. So when Kamala Harris got anointed by Wall Street and the oligarchy, she then couldn't garner a vote. She went out in the primary and she didn't get one delegate. Nobody would vote for her, even though the establishment had already tapped her and she got all kinds of press. It was all positive. And so what did the oligarchy do then? They went to their next most reliable dupe, and that is Joe Biden. Joe Biden's been doing the bidding of Wall Street and the military industrial complex like nobody's business for 40 years in Congress. That's why they went to Joe Biden next, because they knew he was reliable. They went from Kamala Harris, they went to Joe Biden. And that's why we have the two people we have as president and vice president, not because they're actually leaders, but because they are the biggest dupes and the most corruptible pieces of garbage in politics. That's how they became president and vice president, not because they're leaders, but because they're 100% corrupt. The thing that scares the hell out of the establishment the most is to see people on the left and the right realizing we have a common enemy, the establishment that has been crushing us both. You know, we went through 2 years of a controlled demolition of our economy during COVID, and the handful of billionaires and millionaires, they all got richer while we all got poorer, and they want me to blame my neighbor for the pain that we're all feeling economically because they wouldn't take a vaccine that didn't work the way they said it did. And I'm not going to blame my neighbor for that. I'm going to love my neighbor. And so what we're realizing is that we actually have a lot of things in common, left and right. Like we're against the wars and we want to invest that money back here. We're for education that doesn't bankrupt us. So we've got a lot of stuff in common. And what they don't want us to realize that, which is why they have to call half the country fascists now. They have to say the enemy is now within. And that's what Joe Biden has done. That's what the Democratic Party does. But the Democratic Party is the establishment. So the Republican Party is not different than the Democratic Party. They answer to the same people. Trump was an outsider in that. And they're trying to make him seem like he's some kind of special kind of crazy, when all he wasn't as easily controlled as every other politician, because he didn't come up, he doesn't own the favors, and they didn't own him, which is why they had to do 4 years of Russiagate. And now they're still doing FBI raids of his house because they know they're so corrupt. The Democrats and Republicans aren't going to give you any legislation that actually helps your life in a material way. So they have to do all this stuff like we're fighting fascism, like Trump's some kind of a fascist, instead of what he is, which is a game show host. And so that's what this is all about. And they can't let Trump run because they're so corrupt. He would beat them again, which is why they have the FBI going through his closet. And if I ran third party and it actually was successful and I actually started to get 10% in the polls, I will guarantee you they would find kiddie porn on my computer. Because that's the kind of stuff those people do. We're talking about people who kill people for a living. What do you think they're doing in Yemen? They're committing a genocide for money. What do you think we did in Libya? Committing a genocide for money, turning that place into a slave trade. What do you think we did in Iraq? We killed 1 million people for money. What do you think we're doing in Ukraine? We're using those people as cannon fodder for money. And if you don't think they would do the same thing to somebody like me if I actually could threaten the establishment, they would. The first thing they do is they take down my channel. That's the first thing they do. And then they plant kitty. If I didn't go away, they'd plant kiddie porn on my computer. You know that's what they would do. Jill Stein was the Green Party candidate in 2012. She showed up. They wouldn't let her in the debate. They won't even let the people hear you if you're a third party in the United States. They wouldn't let her in the debate. She showed up to the debate. They handcuffed her in the basement for 8 hours. That's what they did to a doctor who was running as a Green Party candidate. And she showed up to a debate. They handcuffed her in the basement for 8 hours. Why? Because the truth is a threat.
Happy Easter, or as President Joe Biden and the White House in Washington put it, Happy Trans Visibility Day. Joe Biden inexplicably chose Easter Sunday, the day of Jesus' resurrection, a hallowed, the holiest day of all, to rebrand Easter Sunday as Trans Visibility Day. Visibility didn't seem to me the major problem that they had. Everyone knows that they exist, and when we see them, I don't often myself, but when we see them, they're pretty visible. It was a provocation by Joe Biden to rebrand Easter Sunday as Trans Visibility Day. It was a spit in the eye of the Christian community, and one gathers that there are quite a few Christians, even now, in the United States of America. Biden sometimes claims to be one of them, claims to be a Roman Catholic, though he is in utter defiance of almost all of the most important parts of Catholic doctrine. He even pooed his pants in front of the Pope. In the Vatican, in what was described as a wardrobe incident, but was, well, quite a wardrobe incident, I can tell you from factotums who were present at the time. Biden claims to be a Christian. Why did he choose Easter Sunday to declare Trans Visibility Day? I have no idea, unless it is because he thinks that he's already lost the election in November, or unless he knows that meaningfully there isn't going to be an election in November, unless he knows something the rest of us don't know. This studied insult to the Christian community in the United States is likely to be the final nail in his coffin. Christ is risen. The resurrection has always inspired Christians around the world. Hundreds of millions of Roman Catholics in particular have fastened on the hope of the resurrection. On Good Friday, the saddest day of the year, Christians believe that Jesus Christ was crucified on the demand of the Pharisees, the Jewish establishment of the time. Pontius Pilate wanted nothing to do with it. He washed his hands, famously, of the whole matter, but the ruling elite amongst the Jewish people at the time demanded the death penalty for this rebel, for this outlaw, for this man, this Palestinian Jew who could walk on water, who cured the sick and healed the lame. Jesus Christ of Nazareth was put to death on the Friday that we now call Good Friday, but the resurrection followed swiftly. And that kind of thing is what has kept me motivated in more than 50 years in politics. The belief that even in the darkest hour, the dawn is not far away, that even in the worst adversity, that a phoenix can rise from the ashes, to mix my cultural metaphors. I believe in Jesus. I believe in his resurrection. I believe that he is the hope of the world. I believe in the judgment day. I believe that all of us on the last day will be judged according to what we have done in and with our lives that God gave us. I believe that we'll be judged on that which we did not do but ought to have done. And that too is a mainspring of my political and moral philosophy. You don't have to. You can believe that the man currently under anesthesia in Tel Aviv this evening, Benjamin Netanyahu, will not pay for his sins, will not pay for his crimes. He may evade the hammer of justice in this life, but you'd have to be a pretty hardcore atheist to believe that this man, Netanyahu, will escape eternal damnation for the crimes he's been committing, not just since October the 7th, but indeed throughout his entire political career. But he's not unique.